The barn was smaller than I remembered, leaning slightly to one side, its paint long peeled away by years of wind and sun. My grandfather had left it to me in a will no one else had contested. Strange, considering how close I had been to my cousins. Everyone expected the estate to be divided evenly, yet somehow this crumbling structure, forgotten by all, was mine. I approached it carefully, the gravel crunching under my shoes, my heartbeat oddly loud in the quiet countryside. The air smelled of old hay, damp earth, and something metallic I couldn't place. I ran a hand along the weathered wood. It was rough, splintered in places, but surprisingly sturdy. My grandfather had built it well, even if no one had cared for it in decades. Hey, if you enjoy my content, please subscribe and hit the bell. Your support means everything and helps me keep creating. Thank you so much. Inside, shadows clung to every corner. Sunlight pierced through holes in the roof, illuminating dust motes dancing like tiny specters. Broken tools lay scattered on the floor, and a faint draft carried the scent of old leather, oil, and something faintly sweet. It felt alive, almost breathing, though I knew it was just empty space filled with memory. I began to explore, stepping over old crates and overturned barrels. The barn had been neglected, yes, but the structure told stories. Marks on the beams suggested repairs done by hands skilled yet impatient. There were corners that had clearly been used for storing feed, areas that smelled faintly of paint or chemicals, and patches of floor so worn that years of foot traffic had polished the wood smooth. Then I noticed the loft. A ladder, leaning at a dangerous angle, led upward. Dust clung thickly to the rungs, but I felt drawn to it, as though something long hidden was waiting above. My grandfather had been secretive in his later years, the kind of man who smiled and nodded when asked a question, never revealing the answer. Could it be that he had left me something more than a barn, something hidden? I climbed slowly, careful not to disturb the fragile wood. Each creak of the ladder echoed in the vast space below. When I reached the top, I froze. Light spilled across a collection of objects I hadn't expected. Old trunks, faded cloth sacks, and at the far end, a large wooden crate that seemed newer than anything else in the barn. It wasn't just a barn. It was a vault. And whatever my grandfather had hidden here was waiting for me to find it. My pulse quickened, a mix of fear and anticipation. I realized that what looked like inheritance on paper might be something far more significant, something that could change everything. As I reached for the crate, the air seemed to shift. A sudden chill brushed my neck, and the barn's silence felt heavier, almost sentient. I hesitated. Then I pulled open the lid, and the first thing I saw made me step back, heart racing, because this was nothing like I had imagined. Inside the crate was a collection of items that made no immediate sense, yet felt deliberately placed, as if my grandfather had arranged them for the moment I would arrive. There were stacks of yellowed papers tied with fraying string, a few leather-bound books, and, oddly, a small metal box with intricate carvings I couldn't identify. Each object carried the scent of age, dust, and something faintly coppery, like old coins or rusted metal. I picked up the papers first. They were letters meticulously folded, written in my grandfather's precise hand. Some were addressed to people I didn't know. Others seemed to be diaries, accounts of daily life and business transactions long forgotten. But as I flipped through them, a pattern emerged. He had been more than a farmer. He had connections, secrets, and influence far beyond what anyone in the family had known. There were records of land purchases, debts owed, and a network of exchanges, financial and otherwise, that hinted at a life of quiet strategy. The books were journals, filled with cryptic notes and diagrams. Some pages were written in codes I couldn't immediately decipher. Others contained sketches of mechanical devices, storage layouts, and what looked like maps of hidden compartments within the barn itself. It was as though he had treated this barn as a personal archive, safeguarding knowledge, treasures, and secrets that no one else would find. Then I reached for the small metal box. It was cold, heavier than it looked, and sealed with a delicate clasp. My fingers shook as I lifted it, the weight of what it might contain pressing down on me. Something about it felt alive, charged with intention. I opened it slowly. Inside were old coins, jewelry, and a collection of keys, tiny, ornate, each with a unique design. They weren't valuable in the ordinary sense, though some shone like gold. They felt symbolic, like markers to unlock something else. I realized the barn itself was part of a puzzle. My grandfather had left instructions scattered across decades of notes, journals, and objects. Everything I had found, the crate, the papers, the books, the keys, was connected, and he had trusted me to follow the trail, to understand the hidden value in what everyone else had dismissed as a decrepit building. As I explored further, I noticed gaps in the floorboards, panels in the walls that didn't align properly, small hatches that led to spaces too narrow for casual storage. Each discovery revealed another layer of design, another layer of intention. He had created a hidden labyrinth within the barn, a place where his secrets would survive, accessible only to someone willing to see beyond appearances. Hours passed. Sunlight shifted across the beams, the dust swirling in golden streams. I worked methodically, moving crates, checking for hidden compartments, testing the keys in locks I discovered. One by one, the spaces revealed objects, documents, and artifacts that made me realize the barn wasn't just a structure. It was a repository of my grandfather's life work, intelligence, and foresight. By evening, I had uncovered ledgers with numbers that suggested investments, lands, and assets that had never been spoken of. There were letters from distant cities, confirmations of ownership, and notes detailing arrangements for people and places I had never heard of. It became clear that this barn, neglected by everyone else, held wealth and knowledge far beyond ordinary comprehension. And then, in the loft behind a false panel, I found a final compartment. Inside lay a sealed envelope addressed to me. My grandfather's handwriting, familiar and comforting, instructed me to read it only after I had explored the barn and discovered its contents. I opened it with reverence. The letter wasn't about money or possessions. It was about trust, responsibility, and the family legacy he had carried quietly for decades. It explained why he had left the barn to me alone, why he had hidden everything, and why no one else in the family had been allowed to know. I was not merely inheriting property. I was inheriting the knowledge, strategy, and careful stewardship of a life that had been invisible to everyone but him. The barn was no longer just a barn. It was a map, a history, and a test. And in that moment, I understood. My grandfather had trusted me to rise above the assumptions of everyone else, to see value where others saw decay, and to claim the inheritance of wisdom and foresight he had built in secret. I stepped back, heart racing, realizing that everything about this inheritance, every secret, every hidden object, was designed to prepare me for something far greater than I had imagined. The real legacy wasn't wealth alone. It was the power to see what others overlooked, to act with patience, and to claim what was rightfully mine in a way only I could.